Now, it's my pleasure to announce the next speaker. And this gentleman has been a long-time member of the ULT. He's spoken on different continents, on different subjects, and I think one of the things that I appreciate most about this speaker is that he's always able to stretch what we think we know about Theosophy, to give us different perspectives, to give us new views, and to make us again ponder about what we thought we knew. Eugene Jennings.
Thank you. Hello. Hola. First, it's just a habit of mine. I'd like to say thank you to our teachers and to the community to which they belong, and for allowing us to borrow their teachings. And hopefully we borrow them long enough to make them our own. So I'd like to throw that thanks out to them. And then for you guys for having me come back again, or for tolerating me again. Let's work this. I've been charged with presenting as much as I can, in as simple terms as I can, about what HPB said in regards to philosophy. What did she bring? What were the principles of philosophy that she brought to the world? So, short answer, the three fundamental propositions that hold the complete teaching. And for this point of view, we are the three fundamental propositions. That's the simple answer. And if we can recognize the three fundamental propositions that we are and the ground from which they arise, then we can own the teaching. Nothing is done without a purpose. Okay, conventional philosophy, I just want to put the slide there because I don't want to talk about it, because I don't have enough time. But I would like to say that the conventional philosophy does deal both with deduction as well as induction. It says it looks critically, methodically, systematically, categorically at knowledge. Some of the difficulties are that it seeks logical conclusions, and some of the things that we're dealing with are not logical on this plane of existence. And it deals particularly with one plane of existence, i.e., looking at all of the metaphysics from a concrete perspective. Now, having said that, there are many philosophers, and I was going to give a handout, but I realized that, as Herman told me, that would be over 1,000 pages, so it wouldn't work. But there are, if anyone is interested, and you don't have to be, a couple of 2 pages. I have a page of philosophers, their particular point of view, because the philosophy, which deals with many gaps, has been broken up into existentialism, humanism, the issues about substance, the issues about monads, the issues about rational, the issues about concrete. How can we prove? And we can only prove with objective devices that we can lean on based on our senses. Real limitation from the point of view of Theosophy. But there are many, and we've heard some of those mentioned at previous conferences, Spinoza, Lisbeth, and I never get the names right, that have contributed really valid ideas, pieces of the teachings in their own ways. There's another group of philosophers that are what we call either the initiates, the philosophers, the aspirants, who again have had a deeper understanding and have presented theirs, and Madame Blavatsky speaks about them throughout Isis Unveiled as well as the Secret Doctrine. And so for your perusal during your free time, feel free to open up Isis and Secret Doctrine. Now, what do the teachers want? The whole conference is about the Mahachohan's letter. Everything that they want is in the letter. So I need not explain that, even though I feel compelled to. There is another letter, letter 6, in the Mahatma letters, and it dovetails with the letter of the Mahakoan. And it says, the teachers want a philosophy that is the highest philosophy, that encompasses the most universal understanding of doctrine and humanity. And so the next question was, how? And the how to that universal philosophy was HPB. They said we need an agent to bring pieces of this into the world, as she puts it, the algebraic expression of what lies beyond. And so, to get to the point, her definition of philosophy, instead of the love of wisdom, is the wisdom of love. And she tells us point blank in The Origin of the Mysteries, in the footnote, as well as in several articles on philosophy that she has written, that love means Eros. But what does that mean? And so before we answer that question directly, in the same paragraph, as she is explaining what Eros is, what it is the effect of, and what it is the cause of, she tells us that, and I'm taking this out of sync, because I just wanted to present it in a way that perhaps may flow. She gives us the beginning and the end. And she says that there is this universal element of omnipresence spread throughout space. It is the cause, it is the effect. Coeval with which, and she tells us this in the Secret Doctrine, is one law. Which brings us to the point that she tells us in the Secret Doctrine also that there is only one breath. And when that one breath is in manifestation, she calls it one motion. And she tells us that that one motion becomes diverse motion, and diverse motion becomes manifestation. So with that beginning, she explains that Eros is the primordial principle in divine creation. And the words for me are very, very important, because even though we can sense divinity here on earth, there is no divine, and this is controversial, but I like to provoke, here on earth. So the question is, where does it lead us? Divine creation, synonymous with the abstract desire in nature for procreation, resulting in an everlasting series of phenomena. What is that? Three fundamentals. Everywhere we look, the three fundamentals haunt us in the teachings. So we're talking about, again, that first principle, that universal, on the one hand, essence, on the other hand, absolute. We're talking about law that is inherent within its very nature, and the everlasting series of organized forms through which that one life progresses. And once we come to that realization that Eros is that principle, and Erwin and I had a little talk about this yesterday, Eros, Logos, same, different. And I said, for myself, because I can only speak for myself, on the side of manifestation, we have Eros. And so when we talk about the wisdom of Eros, we're talking about something which is even a little bit more than just the abstract principle in nature. Because Madame Blavatsky says, seek out the cause. And what is the cause? And this is where the idea, for me, of the first Logos comes in, because it's not manifested. She tells us that it is ever hidden. It is the thought that gives rise to the word, and the word is the verb that moves everything into action. Did I go backwards? I did. And sometimes I guess I have to go backwards before I go forward. And so the question in my mind was, if Eros is the effect, and truly then the logos is the cause, then the logos is the within, the eros works from without. And again, these are words, they're conceptual, they have no real meaning, but they help this I organize its thoughts around principles that are very, very abstract. And the word mastery is there at the bottom because a few slides later we will see that this is something that truly is mastered. So the inside of this then brings us to this, and again, conceptual design, but it's from the Secret Doctrine, because she tells us that divine mind is coherent with, and this is all the philosophy, and the foundation, I believe, is important for me to understand before the particulars become applicable. Divine mind is there, it's inherent, it's within that universal substance which is omnipresent, and we might say as well, omnipotent as well as omniscient. That divine mind, she tells us, gives rise to the first logos, which never manifests, i.e. the thought never comes out of our mouth. The expression of the thought comes out of our mouth. That expression is Eros coming into manifestation using the first principles of nature, which differ from the first principles of our inner nature, to manifest through Fohat, because that is the force that hardens the atoms in the cosmos, or perhaps related to what we now call Higgs particle, one aspect of that force, in order to manifest cosmos. But this is all the hidden side, plus more, but that hidden side is the nature of the monad. And that monad is eternally vibrant because it is the one motion of our being, of which we are that part. Not a thing that you're going to say here or there, but something that we have to resonate with. Once we've got that foundation, and we realize that this is the germ, this is the root of our being, that we are ever trying to realize as we walk every day and talk every day, we can begin to see that the other portion of her definition of Eros was when we begin to work with that, we come to a point where if we're realizing the cause and the effects and the relationships, we're in the position that this then becomes the wisdom standing behind Eros, which is the wisdom of Eros, which becomes the manifestation. When we master that, and I know what some folks may think, but this is an I perspective. When we master that, she says we're talking about the highest adeptship. Who holds the keys? Who knows the seed? Who knows the fullness? And those are, again, the teachers that we borrowed the teachings from. But to say another word about that, again, for me, as an I, it's important to realize that they are the Namanikayas, as she says in the Secret Doctrine, those relatively perfected beings who had assimilated all of the knowledge in that lends us this philosophy. And she says, and she has a wonderful description of that being that is not a personality, and this is what we touched on last night, that comes to merge with matter in the second round. We're not talking about the teachers that awaken the mind in the third round, but in the second round. And that second round, again, something to think about, is related to a global process. She tells us there are 12 orders of such beings, 4 of whom have achieved that state of nirvana, 1 of whom is transitioning into that state, leaving 7 others, i.e., the leaders or the teachers of our races, of our cycles, of our rounds, etc., to disseminate and wake us up beyond our ego and reveal that knowledge or the philosophy that HPB brought us as a living fact and a living power in our lives. So, they are the instructors. They are now the awakeners of mind. They are the lighters up of manas. Has anyone seen Noah? The movie? 2, okay. I love the first part when the angels got caught in the stone. And they're walking around and they're dragging because, again, what does she tell us about Lucifer? Those that are enlightening our minds have been placed here. And they're here. The community is here. And so they are the ones responsible for helping struggling animal form awaken to intelligence, and awaken then to humanity, and then awaken to spirituality. Brings us to part 2. Good 10 minutes. The range of our teaching. In a nutshell, the range is everything. But I would like to direct your minds now to the proem of the Secret Doctrine, where she describes the stanzas. And she tells us that the first stanza represents the absolute in the prolaic state, and there's nothing really to say about it, but then she goes on to say many, many things. And then she tells us that the second stanza, which is, again, part of the philosophy, it doesn't make any sense to say, I view, it's too abstract. Jump in and get destroyed by it. Second, she says, is very much like the first, so she has to leave it to your intuition to work with. But then she gives us information later on in the third that says the third is the emergence of the monads from that state, which means that there's got to be preparation in number 2 in order for the monads to begin to metaphorically awaken and emerge. She says number 4 has to do with the thrilling of life through the monadic germ, which is not the monad, but the germ that is inherent within the monad that gives birth to life. She says in number 5 stanza that this is the birth of substance, that universally diffused essence that begins the formation of, in 6, the galaxies, the worlds, and she tells us it can be applied on every level. She's only talking about it from the point of view of our solar system, but it can be applied on every level. And then 7, the formation of the earth down to the awakening of mind and the entry of our teachers into this global formation to awaken the monastic element of our nature. And so once that happens, the second part of the range of the philosophy has to do with the awakening of that nature, the races, the rounds, the senses, the awakening and development of consciousness in its application to global phenomena, which is very, very different than spiritual consciousness, but necessary nonetheless. And she tells us, after we look at all of these things that we have to understand, embrace, and appreciate, assimilate, resonate with, become, that the goal is the totality of the awakened state of the monad as the culmination of the divine incarnations on earth. Wonderful. So now, back in the beginning, when we were talking about the monad and everything that is inherently within it, and she says the monad doesn't progress per se. It awakens, but it doesn't evolve per se. Forms evolve. The organizational structures through which those monadic powers work evolves, not the monad. Once we've got all of that as a working foundation perhaps in our heads, and if we're lucky in our lives, she puts it all together for us. And when she puts it together, she gives us, throughout the Secret Doctrine, many systems. But she tells us that the system of Patanjali, the system of the esoteric side of the Yogacara system, and the Mahayana system, the esoteric side, are good reflections of the true esoteric doctrine. And then she gives us that chart on 157, volume 1, 156, of the schools in contrast and says that everyone must, in the end, go through the process of the Taraka Yoga system. So, since we can use any of those, she puts it together by explaining a diagram. This is in 5 years of Theosophy, and she's got a couple of articles in there that are just phenomenal in regards to disturbing our mind and pushing the envelope regarding our understanding. And so in short, all I really want to say about this slide is that these are the 7 principles. And she explains how this system uses those 7 principles in 5 years of Theosophy. If we're using it from the point of view of the lower mind incarnating through the 4 planes, it's one thing. If we're using it from the point of view of the Brahmanic ego incarnating into the universe, it's another thing. If we're looking at it from the point of view of the embryo and the utilization of DNA out of the cytoplasm and the differentiation of the cells, races, it's another thing. But the important thing is it also correlates, she tells us, with that diagram on page 200, which is the triangle and then the 4 lower planes and how we go through those planes. And unless we attune our consciousness to those higher planes, which are monastically represented in the diagram as ahankara, and then Buddhically as mulaprakriti in its 3 aspects, and she explains that in 5 years of Theosophy, and Purusha if we're looking at it as Atma. But the important thing is, in the philosophy, this is a real possibility. You can say you're not ready for it, that's fine. The teachers tell us take as much as you can take, do as much as you can do. But it gives us an anchor. And if we're earnest, we work with that anchor. The life of the philosopher, very simple. You've been hearing it all along, yesterday, today. You'll hear it tomorrow, in the evening. You'll continue to hear it for the rest of your life. And what it is, at the top, live the life to know the doctrine. That was said yesterday. You don't live it, you can't really talk about it. It's not heart doctrine. And again, heart, head, 6 to 1, half dozen the other. I understand what the teachings say, but the teachings also say other things. Making it a living power in your life, which is a power that destroys ego. You face death every minute. And when you face death enough, there's nothing to face, and then you realize there's nobody home. And the thing that is home is taking up space in an improper way. And so we look for the fire, and we actually crave the obstacles, the challenges, the problems, because that is working with the ego. Destroying it and showing that it's not what it thinks it is, almost. Okay. Once we've got that together and we've done all of this, what we've been doing all along in the philosophy is altruistic work, because that is another way of getting beyond the illusionary conception of an ego. I'm not talking about a body. I'm talking about an ego and a personality with a little e. And we serve as best we can for the same goal that the teachers and Madame Blavatsky have presented to us over and over again. And to help us do that, there are what everybody is familiar with and what's out there on the table, statements such as Kwan Yin Pledge. And you can read it silently. You probably know it already. But again, this is the philosophy, if we have the courage to live, that destroys our life in a good way. And to end, I would like to read something that Madame Blavatsky wrote in ISIS, which sums up everything that this I just said, but in a much more wonderful way. And it was from Isis Unveiled, Volume 1, Roman numeral 11 through 13, so it's an excerpt. But she's talking about Plato as a real philosopher. And she says, basing all his doctrine upon the presence of the supreme mind, Plato taught that the nous, spirit or rational soul of man, being generated by the divine Father, possessed a nature that was kindred with it, or even homogeneous with the divinity. It was capable, therefore, of beholding the eternal realities. Capable, possible, real. This faculty of contemplating reality in a direct and immediate manner belongs to God alone. The aspiration for this knowledge constitutes what is really meant by philosophy, the love of wisdom, and in light of her other definition, we might say the wisdom of love. It is the love of truth, which is inherently the love of good. And so, how do we get rid of ego? And so, predominating over every desire of the soul, predominating, crushing, purifying it and assimilating it to the divine, thus governing every act of the individual, every act of the individual. We're possessed. We're obsessed. It raises man to a participation and communion with divinity and restores him to the likeness of God. This flight, says Plato, consists in becoming like God, and this assimilation is the becoming just and holy with wisdom. Thank you.